Number of new vaccine doses, a large number, arriving at the weekend. 5.7 million doses of the Pfizer shot being donated by the US government. There were initial vaccination targets. We had hoped to meet them. We missed some of them. That, of course, meant that the third wave, the Delta variant, hit us quite hard. So, is this going to help us catch up? Joined now by our Professor Barry Shub. He's the co-chair of the Ministerial Advisory Committee on COVID-19 vaccines. Professor Shub, good evening to you. Thank you for your time. We're beginning to see now the vaccination process really picking up. Suddenly we get news of another 5 million doses. I'm presuming a free donation from the US. That's got to be good news for the program.
That's exceptionally good news. It's great. Yeah, absolutely. Certainly going to contribute. We are kind of galloping along now, making up for lost time. In fact, I just saw a statistic that we're actually the 11th fastest vaccinating country relative to population at the moment in the world. So that's good news.
So, I mean, the big bottleneck, the thing that slowed us down, wasn't really getting injections into arms here in South Africa. It was getting vaccine doses. That problem, by and large, seems to have been sorted out. We seem to be getting them on a regular basis.
Yeah, you know, Stephen, the problem was that is really not, people often forget it, was the problem with the variant. You know, we were dominated by this particular vaccine-resistant variant, the beta variant, and that limited our vaccine choices essentially at the time to Pfizer and to Johnson & Johnson. We're now dominated by the Delta variant, and the one, I guess, a bit of good news is not, the Delta variant's got a lot of bad news, but the one good thing is that it's relatively less resistant to vaccines. So it can potentially widen our vaccine choices. But we do have an ample supply of both these vaccines, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and these are both the two premium vaccines in the world. So in that way, we are quite fortunate.
If we have enough doses, the only problem really, the only reason that we couldn't vaccinate enough people, the only two reasons would be if people refuse to vaccinate, and there's not much evidence of that in South Africa yet, or if our health department isn't able to actually inject enough people quickly enough. And yet, we're seeing, I think, 250, 220,000 people being vaccinated every day. It's a very large number.
It is, and they're actually aiming to do 300,000 by the end of the month, or by end of August, I should say. But Stephen, I should note, vaccine hesitancy isn't a negligible problem in the country. It is a serious problem. We don't really have precise dimensions of it. It varies, obviously, from which population one is doing a survey from. But it can be up to about 30% of that particular population are vaccine hesitant. And this is a concern. It's a concern from our Ministerial Advisory Committee, concerned Department of Health, because that vaccine hesitant group we need to address. We need to kind of get people to be vaccinated. We need to communicate to them the safety and the efficacy of vaccines, and to reassure them, because often there are unfounded fears about vaccines, or this vaccine.
One of the things that might happen is that more and more people, as they get vaccinated, it becomes really, and safely so, it becomes harder to argue against vaccines, because as the evidence from countries which are ahead of us shows, vaccines work. They protect you from severe symptoms of COVID-19.
You're right. You know, Stephen, we have two groups of people who don't take vaccines. The one are the anti-vaxxers. They are a bit of, if I could call it, hardcore activists who will, you know, believe in various conspiracy theories about long-term effects and long-term dangers of vaccines, and they're very difficult to get over. But then we have a large group of vaccine-hesitant people who, I guess, do have a justifiable concern. These vaccines are new vaccines that have been developed very rapidly, and really it's our job, and the media's job as well, to try and get good information, scientific evidence-based information about these vaccines, that they are extraordinarily safe and effective.
We're using at the moment, as you point out, the Pfizer vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. The other vaccine which has been approved, I think the phrase is registered for use by the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, is the Sinovac vaccine made in China. And yet I'm not aware of any of those doses arriving in South Africa yet.
No, not as yet, not as far as I know. We are still, as a MAC, we have done an in-depth review of both the Sinovac as well as the AstraZeneca vaccine, because the AstraZeneca vaccine, unlike the beta variant, the Delta variant seems to be affected by AstraZeneca, and we're looking at these for backup. But if our pipeline of Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer, which really are excellent vaccines, they're the two premium vaccines, are still online, we might not need a third vaccine backup. But it's always good to kind of at least have the information in case we need to go for a third vaccine.
Professor Barry Shub, co-chair of the Ministerial Advisory Committee on COVID-19 Vaccines. I do appreciate the time tonight on The Pulse. Thanks very much indeed.